subject of dining and cooking and so forth in this space. It's very, very unusual. It's never happened in my time as far as and so it's great to welcome again someone who is not just a friend to us, but also knows the old hall very well indeed. This bit. Okay, good. Well, let me just explain. We're going to have a talk, and then light refreshments will be served in the cafe area, and there will be a raffle beforehand, so we will have the draw just before we go through. Emergency exit, okay? You go through that doorway there, turn right, and the exit door is straight in front of you, on the side there. And, but I'm assured that all is well for this evening. Leslie Smith is coming as Florence Nightingale, and we do have quite a few tickets. She's coming on the 28th of August at 7:30, and if it happens, we will be at the great hall. Okay. Now, if there are not sufficient sales of tickets, we will have to cancel. But we will let you know, all being well. Is that okay? Next month, which is August, the way the months are going, soon be Christmas. Paul Kemp has kindly said that he will take us on a guided tour of Church Street in Gainsborough.
Could you just speak up there?
Yeah, there will be a guided tour of Church Street on the first Tuesday in August. Now, what we generally do is we gather in the marketplace at 7 o'clock, because in August the light is going, as you will understand, and Paul will take us on a tour of Church Street. Okay?
What age is that?
No, I have to do that. I meant to. First Tuesday in August, please.
Is it Tuesday, is it?
The 5th.
First Tuesday.
The first Tuesday. Okay. In September, we will be again in Gainsborough House, and the guest speaker in September will be, and it's the 2nd of September, will be an artist at work, and she will be talking about her passion for watercolours and so forth. Those of you who probably bought cards of the Old Hall, Tony did those watercolours. Okay. Here we are, Martin. We're going to sit next to Chris. There we are. And if you've got any suggestions for speakers for next year, do let me know. I'm already thinking of getting those together. I'm sorry to be in advance, but you need to be in advance, as you can appreciate. For instance, I was in Gainsborough Hall last Tuesday, and I thought, well, this is getting very interesting with the Hutton family and all the rest of it. So we'll see what we can do. Now, it gives me great pleasure to welcome no stranger to this place, Jan of Forgotten Fayre, who is making a wonderful contribution to the Old Hall in revealing dining and eating in the medieval age. And last December, we had a couple who came in December, was it? And they were disappointed that we were not in the medieval kitchen. I said, do you realise how cold it is in the kitchen at the moment? And I promised that we would be here in the summer. The couple are not here, but nevertheless, we are. So that's how it goes. backdrop? What an ambience? Over to you, Jeanette.
Well, everyone, don't call me Jeanette, I'm Jan, friends, family, of Jan. I'm very, very fortunate. I've actually cooked in this kitchen many, many times, so I'm quite familiar with the procedures and how to cook and such. But tonight, not touching on the recipes and the foods, I'm actually talking about the kitchen itself, how state-of-the-art it was in 1480, and how some of the features make it of that status, and it's the best preserved in the whole country, in my opinion, and in several other people's too. Now, a lot of the information on the running kitchen and the people that were in it, I've gleaned from a wonderful person, Peter Burgess, and I have to acknowledge he is simply the best. And if you have any interest in cooking and dining through the ages, this is the book you want for medieval, going forward into Tudor, and there is a follow-on book for the later centuries. And he is the leading person to look at when you're looking at the architecture of the building and the development of kitchens. So, to give a bit of background, originally, going all the way back to the roundhouses of the Iron Age and Bronze Age, cooking was done on a central fire on the floor, and with thatched roofs. They didn't have a hole for a chimney because that would have encouraged the fire to be too bright. Sparks in the thatch is not a good idea. So the smoke would dissipate through the thatch, and they were very, very smoky. As for utensils, there is a spectacular dig going on at the moment, not far from Flag Pen in Peterborough, and it's been nicknamed the Pompeii of the Fens. And this is a village that was built out over the fens, over water, and sadly it burnt down. I don't believe it was attacked, I think it was just absolutely burnt down. Everything fell into the silt, so everything was preserved beautifully. And a lot of information on how they cooked, even over water, has come from that. And it's the central fire principle. Now we do know here at the Old Hall that there used to be a central fire in the Great Hall, and above that, at one time, there would have been a louver at this one above us that would take away much of the smoke. And in some buildings, you could actually control the direction of the louvers. But it's a transition from around end of the 1200s, the 13th century, going forward into the 1400s and 15th century. There are great changes taking place. Before those dates, kitchens were quite firmly away from the main residences. Now we're talking about great houses here, not the peasants and the poorer people in the small townhouses or the small cottage-type buildings that they were living in. This is particular to castles and great buildings. The kitchens were away. They were a fire risk, so they were away. The result was that the Lord's dinner was quite often very cold when you got it. So you start to get kitchens coming closer, and maybe even a dedicated kitchen just for the Lord's food. Or perhaps it's cooked in the main kitchen and then brought in for reheating in these small integral kitchens in the castles and the big buildings. A good one to go to see this exact layout is Bolton Castle. So they believe that the main kitchen was away at the end of the courtyard, possibly right at the very edge of the bailey, whereas there is a kitchen inside the building itself, and that was dedicated to getting the Lord's dinner to him hot. So now we're starting to see chimneys. Now the development of fireplaces, flues and chimneys is what dictates how kitchens become designed in later centuries. And as I said, this one's state of the art. You've got behind me, you've got the roasting range. Now this is where the really big pieces of wood would be used, and even the wood had to be stored somewhere. So bear that in mind for a moment. Behind you is the boiling range, where things were boiled and cooked. But bear in mind that the cooks have got to bend over these cauldrons and then they have to stir them. So are they going to use great big pieces of wood like these here, which are perfect for this side of the kitchen? So something else. And it's compact. It doesn't feel compact to our kitchens that we have today, but in medieval terms, it's got quite a lot packed into this kitchen, because you've not just got your cooking area and your fires, you've also got the hierarchy of the people who are running the manor house on behalf of the Lord. And the kitchen is designed around their functions. So up here, you can see there's a gallery. That's a deliberate design, and there would have been a continuation along to that doorway there. Now, who had which room is debatable, but it's thought that the kitchen clerk was there. Below, in the little corner, is the pastry clerk, or the person responsible for the pastries, because the window there indicates a pastry preparation area. So it's particularly planned. The little room in the corner was the boiling range, so there would have been a huge means of cooking, huge pieces of meat in there, and the flue is shared with the big fireplace boiling range behind you. The strange little room that is currently displaying how a spice might be laid out is actually designed so that the officer of the kitchen that is in there, the surveyor, can survey both the kitchen and its workers, and outside the servery he can see every single dish that is taken through to the Lord and through to the Great Hall. So lighting, it's very light and airy, and one of the reasons is these big windows. Now they tell you that the light was for the clerks to work in their rooms. There are windows, and it's quite a difficult hierarchy to explain. The chamberlain is responsible for everything regarding the Lord in his private chambers. The steward is responsible for everything else. And below him, you've got people like a finance clerk, you've got someone that will purvey, so he's a purveying clerk, you've got a treasurer, you've got a kitchen clerk, you've got all sorts of clerks, and every item in the kitchen, no matter how small, was inventoried and counted every day. So the windows allow slightly different meal times if you need to, because in most kitchens, meal times were set at the time of maximum light. It's something we don't have to even consider, we just flick a switch. But back then, so you would be up at around 4 AM, particularly the officers of the household, the officers of the kitchen, the higher status clerks, would be up at 4 AM because keys had to be issued and everything opened, because everything was kept under lock and key. So that would be done, and then you'd have to do the actual cooking for breakfast, which would be about 8 or 9 AM. If you were a designated person of the household who was allowed breakfast, you might not be. So that was those. The main meal of the day came a bit later, around 12 to 1 o'clock. 10 to 12, because that's the people who their jobs allow them at that time, but it takes advantage of the morning light for the cooking, and then between 12 and 2 in the afternoon, the preparation would be for that main, that last meal, your supper, which would be around 4 o'clock, and by 5 o'clock, the kitchen is closed and it's locked up. So it's quite a long day. In fact, it's a very long day. And the amount of locking up and unlocking when you read through all the different offices that people are carrying out is quite astounding. They lock everything up. The reports have to go in. So these offices with the windows above, and some of them were accommodation for those officers doing the accounting. They counted everything, and even the bread, the pantler had to submit accounts to the kitchen clerk. The kitchen clerk would then submit them to, I think it's the finance clerk. They've all got three different names for the same role. Just make it easy. So, and then he reports into the steward, and then he reports into the chamberlain and the lord on a daily basis. So there's these meetings going on every day. Once a week, they have to do weekly accounts. So there's all these meetings, and that's usually on a Saturday morning. So that's all going. And then you have to do it again, monthly, 3 monthly, and yearly. And all these accounts have to be balanced. So these are quite important people. And you think, why do you need so many managers? Because that's what they are, they're managers. And they would go so far as to stand on these galleries and watch people working. They watched from the doorways, the food went out and counted it. Someone was responsible for counting everyone that ate at table at every meal, and all this information had to be put in the books, basically. So why were they doing it? Well, there were upwards of 100 to 150 people to be fed, clothed, and accommodated in the building and its surroundings. Now this brings us back to the design of the kitchen. It had to be big enough to cater for these numbers. So one of the things that I hear quite often is people come in and say, oh look, bread ovens. Can you get up bread for 100 or 150 people in those ovens? Because I don't think I could. So that indicates something's missing. And what's missing is the bakehouse. We know, logic tells us there was a bakehouse, and I'm so pleased that they've done an archaeological dig at the back here, and they have found evidence of food preparation. Well, that's a surprise. I'm being sarcastic, I shouldn't be, because they're out there in that baking heat, leaning over that hole, doing a fantastic job. So I'm being a bit mean. But it would be lovely if the interpretation comes back that they've actually found the bakehouse. The other thing that they might find is the brew house, because that's not in here either. We've got the buttery, which is where the ale would be stored, but it wasn't bought in, or at least some was bought in, but not in the bulk that was required, because the other thing that I haven't heard, and even Pete, I checked today in his book in case I was misremembering, but I don't think we know where the wells are. And a kitchen like this is going to use an awful lot of water, and they're not going to get it from the river, it's too dirty, they're not fools. So there's got to be a clean water supply somewhere. And that would be near the brew house, because you need a lot of water to make ale. Now they drank ale because the water was questionable in places. Only a few places could trust their water where they knew they'd got a completely freshwater spring or a well that was fed by a freshwater spring, and these places were rare. So ale was the drink of the masses. So it would have been made on site out there, somewhere near the bakehouse. So logic suggests that if the bakehouse is proven to be out there and the brew house is proven to be out there, that's where your water supply is going to be as well. Logic tells you that. Now the ale and associated drinks were kept in the buttery, but the Lord's wine cellar
wasn't there at all, and it wasn't here either. That was if you go into the Great Hall and you see the dais, then to the right, if you go to the right, you'll eventually end up outside, and in that corner is where they think that the wine cellar that served the Lord was situated. So that's something else that's not in the kitchen. So now we're getting a picture that there is a lot more missing than what there is in it. Because where's your dairy? I mean, if you've got roasting range going, boiling range going, and then you've got your other, I've forgotten the name of it, your boiling room at the back there, if you've got that going, and you've got your pie ovens going as well, this is not the place to be making cheese, cream, and keeping your butter and milk. It will curdle. So the dairy has also got to be somewhere close but outside. And then there's your wood store. You would need different types of wood. I've touched on it. I mean, if you like that, you're going to need something smaller to start with. So you would have little tiny faggots, and quite often this could be the dried stalks or tiny twigs wrapped up in a bundle which is called a faggot. Faggots came in different sizes, so you would use that with a flint and a piece of steel to create the sparks to get your fire going. But it's a lot better idea to have a curfew and keep a few embers going, and then all you've got to do is to take the curfew cover off the remains of your embers and give them a or get the bellows. So there's that. So you would also have different size of faggots for a quick, fast boil. If you just wanted, you didn't want a big fire, you didn't want it for an hour, you just wanted a few minutes of fast to cook something, that's what you would use, a small faggot with suitably sized twigs. Now they were also used in the pie ovens, which are situated next to a window with a pastry area for fine work. The Lord's bread's probably cooked in there because he don't have ordinary brown bread and stuff like that. He has proper bread, white bread, on shit. So this is in there, but then that brings you on to, well, you've got a bakehouse, where's the flour stored? Where's your dry store for the dried goods? It's not in here. So where is it? So there must have been another place, either another building, probably not a cellar unless it's absolutely bone dry. A lot of medieval buildings have undercrofts that are very, very dry, constant temperature, perfect for storage. So that's where the bulk of the foods would be stored. And it's another reason why you've got the buttery on the north side of the building, where things need to be kept reasonably cool, but your bread is kept on the other side because beer and the other things in there, sorry, ale. Beer's a nasty continental thing with hip hops in it, nasty pernicious weed, I believe it was called. So that's on the wet side, it's moist, so you want to keep your bread away from it. So the bread would have been, if we go out of here and we take a right, you've got an area that has a railing around, and it's believed that that is where the bread and those dried goods would be kept, some of them, because there's not enough room for the bulk that would be required for 100 to 150 people being fed daily. So what else have you got? Well, what about waste management and cleanliness? This floor in here is not the original floor, quite clearly. A lot of you might recognise the Victorian bricks. Now, in a kitchen, you're going to get spills. It's probable that the floor was kept swept. In some very swanky kitchens, are of a similar date to this, they are slabbed, nice and easy to keep clean. But we don't know what is or was underneath the Victorian bricks. It might have been hardened earth with a cobbled area for heavy trafficked areas. We just don't know. But one of the things that is common in medieval kitchens is for the floor to slope slightly, so any spillages flow away from the work area. But that brings you to, well, what was the waste management? Where was the waste area? Well, probably from reading various books and Peter's interpretation, out there, and this is actually borne out by some of the finds that they did get from this dig that they've already said they found and put on Facebook and such, they found animal bones. So it's possible that the butchery area was out there, and with the butchery we would have a lot of waste. That's probably where the kitchen waste went. Now, it's not going to be likely with the status of this building that you're going to have a cesspit this close, that close to the building. It's going to be somewhere else. Or are they using the River Trent? Now, I don't know if this is correct. If I'm wrong, please tell me, then I'll know for next time. But in the West Wing, there are guardrails that were allegedly flushed by the River Trent. Now, I don't know if that's correct, if it's been proven. It's suspected, I know. Did they have something similar for the kitchen, where all the slops and everything else was swept away? So there's a lot of things to consider. In here, you can see some of the refinements that were for keeping the space pest-free. The whole of the medieval world, the poor medieval housewife had a constant battle about pests that we don't even want to think about today. Top of the list being fleas and woolly moths that eat your clothes away. So they would have a constant battle to keep them down. In the kitchen, it was different pests. It's believed that there would always be a kitchen cat to keep down the rodents, and there are recipes for things that would attract a rodent but were extremely poisonous. It was a bit bad if the cat then ate the rodent because the cat would die, but hey, cats, they breed well. So we know that, but one of the things that they used to do was lime wash, and lime wash just deters. It doesn't kill, but it does deter insects and flies. You can see here, I've got it the wrong way around. There, you can see remains. I'm going up the building, you can see remains of one of lime wash, and on this side as well, just above there, along that side there. You can see all around the building. So that would make it even more bright. The floor would be kept swept. It didn't have strewing herbs like you might have in the main hall. There's a misconception with the strewing of herbs. It's seen as unhygienic, but when you take into consideration the types of herbs and plants that they are strewing on the floor, they all have anti-insecticidal properties. Pennyroyal, brilliant against ants. Meadowsweet, again, you tread on that one, insects don't really like it, but it also releases to our less sensitive noses, because we're used to bursts of air freshener. It's not very much, but it's enough to freshen. So that's what they've got up there. Down here, they've got someone to sweep the floor. So where do they keep the spices? We know they're sending out quite posh foods. Where are they coming from? Where are the trenches coming from that people used to eat from? So there's more questions. The trenchers are actually bought in. They did used to make bread trenchers, and these were made from bread that was 2 to 3 days old, and the idea was that you put your dry food on the trencher. You didn't put any wet food on the trencher because you took it straight from the bowl. There would be one bowl of, say, a pottage, between 4 people or as many as 8 or 10. That's called a mess serving, and they would share it. It was communal. They would take from it. And you think, oh, how unhygienic. Well, perhaps. Later, you got something like this, and these are the ones that were bought in. We imported them from Scandinavia. They came in by the thousands, very, very cheap bits of wood, just there. So now you can actually use it properly as a chopping board to cut your food into tiny pieces called lobbits, because it was very important to eat correctly. Only animals bite. Humans don't bite. You cut your food up into manageable portions and then put it into your mouth. Even peasants do this. And that tradition actually carried down right through the ages, and right up into the 1960s, people on the land would take their bread in their left hand, cut a piece off, then cut a piece of cheese, and then eat it. And the other thing was, you washed your hands before touching food, and that was the rule for in the kitchen too. You washed your hands. So again, the water needed to be clear. So there's lots of things to take into consideration. So you've set the food, you've cooked the food, you've sent it out through the servery, and then it's all the washing up's got to come back. So where is the scullery? It's not in here. So where's the scullery? Again, it would be out the back, and the only door that leads out into what would be considered a service area or ancillary area for the kitchen is that one there, which is where the dig was on the other side of that door. So there's going to be a whole complex. I don't think English Heritage are going to let the archaeologists loose and go right around the building to find everything, but it would be nice, wouldn't it? Then we'd know where everything is. That's something else that would be out there. And it would be a child doing all that washing up. Probably a child. Children worked in the kitchen quite often. They were, as they grew, they would be referred to as henchmen, the lowest level. Then they might make yeomen and go up the hierarchy, and maybe even make it to being a clerk, which would have been quite a prestigious appointment. So the pantler, pan, bread, from Latin and French. He's looking after the bread and the salt and other dried goods. So he's in the pantry. Then you've got the ewerer. Now he is the man who's looking after the water, and he would prepare the herbal waters and the sweet waters for people to wash their hands at the top table, but also there would be a ewer of water just beyond the doors entering into the main hall. There would have been a screened off area, and the ewers would work there, and people would wash their hands. They would pour the water from a small ewer, maybe no more than a litre size, and wash their hands before they went to table. So you've got the ewer. Then you've got an area somewhere between here and the dais where the napery would be kept. So the napier would look after all the linens. So I'm very lucky, you can come up and handle this later. This is a very old piece of, we think, Victorian diaper linen, and it gives you an idea of the sort of toweling and diaper linen that would have been used in great lengths for the Lord's table. There would be at least 5 stretches of linen just on the table itself. His bread was specially cut up and wrapped in fine linen. He would have a fine linen napkin. My replica napkin is somewhat coarser. Can't run to diaper linen for me. But the story goes that the linens, as they got stained from wine and food spillages, they would be cut down into napkins, and then when the napkins became stained and no good, they would be reused and repurposed until eventually they ended up on a baby's bottom. And we think that's why in America diaper refers to the weave or diamond weave of the linen, because it's more absorbent than a straight weave, and that's why they call them diapers. Here in Britain, we call them nappies because they came from napkins, we think. I'm sure if one of us wrote to Susie Dent, she would soon set us straight on that one. That's your linens, but where is the napery? We don't know. I don't know where the napery is. Maybe they've discovered it since I last read or researched. So that's something else. types of bowls and pitchers, ewers. These are pansions, basically mixing bowls. This one is for slow cooking or keeping something warm. And we know this because of the legs and the fact that it's pottery. So if you're cooking with pottery, you cook differently than if you cook with, say, a cast iron pot, which is high status at this day because cast iron is a new development that has happened on the back of making cannons. And the cauldrons of the pot-bellied shape with the three legs have begun to be cast. Previously they were made by metal being beaten and riveted into shape. So it's a different technique and it brings it into the realms of, as we go through Tudor times, the cast iron and metal work, the copper pans and such really take off because the technology is evolving all the time. But at this date, a cast iron pot, which is what every reenactor has, might not be quite right. The earliest cauldron that you will find, I believe in Britain, I don't think we found an earlier one yet, is the Battersea cauldron, which is bronze, and you can quite clearly see how the bands are riveted together and where it's been beaten into shape. But it's quite easy in pottery to get that curved shape and spread the heat around. But you can't put this directly onto heat, it will just crack, it'll break. So you pour warm water, hot water in it first, warm it first, and it's designed to nestle at the side of the fire or on embers, not in a flame. So that's the principle behind the different shapes of pottery that you can see. Now I was told by a potter who does lecture in pottery right from old Greece, ancient Greece, that if it's flat like this, it's called a kettle. So there you go, that's your kettle. And if it's like this, with these, it's a pipkin. And a pipkin can come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. There's quite an array behind you in the boiling range. So what's the other development? Well, I spoke about the pastry. Now there were two ways to make the pastry. There are no cooking containers as such. You can't open your cupboard and take out a flan tin and go, oh, I'll make a tart. No. The pastry was a type of hot water pastry, and it didn't have any fat in it till quite late, until at least 1450. That's when they started putting fat into it, making it a little shorter and edible. I mean, it was edible before, if you could soak it for a week. But you would make the container and you would eat the filling, not necessarily the container. So what else are we getting? It's 1480, we've got all mod cons. So we're starting to see shallow dishes like this one, shallow dishes that will take a pastry that can be quite short because it can go in the oven. So that's another thing that started to happen. You could make pastry into all sorts of shapes and sizes. A flan point is a flan possibly made with the old-fashioned pastry that is quite hard and you don't want to eat it, or you could use a dish like that one. And it was literally shaped like flower petals, little flower petals sticking up from the pastry. Points, little points that would brown quite nicely in the oven. The other thing that was quite spectacular when they made it is a castellet. So you've got a short, stumpy pork pie shape in the middle, and then to create corners, you've got four like towers that are crenellated around the top. Each one has a different filling. Now, the question is, did they bake it blind and then put the filling in, or did they put the fillings in and put it in the oven? difficult to say. Peter Breers does give 2 different ways of doing it. I've not tried either because I made short crust pastry and mine collapsed. So that was my first attempt. I got the pastry completely wrong. So I appreciate the skill of cooking it in one of those ovens and getting it straight. But the interesting thing is, it's sent out flambe. So each of the towers is lit with aqua vitae, otherwise known to us as brandy, and lit up. So that, all those complex things at that corner, that's why they needed the window. So what else were they doing? Well, you could do a boar's head. Now this is where it gets really interesting, because the boar's head, you need the boar's head, but, so you need the butchery. You need it cutting in a particular way from the animal, and then you need someone with considerable knife skills to remove the skull and all the other icky bits and appendages and stuff from it, to render the skin to a state where you can then salt it, and you practically turn it into leather. So it's a process somewhere between salting and tanning. So where are you going to do that? There's no room in here to do that. So again, there's got to be another food prep area outside. So where was it done? Once it's ready, it comes back in and it's stuffed. And it's stuffed with things like breadcrumbs with herbs, which will give you, with fresh herbs, and give you a nice green layer. Or you might have breadcrumbs with saffron for yellow. And then you might have different types of meat, because duck can cook quite pink, you can cook beef quite pink, then you've got the white of chicken, no turkey, not invented though, well they are invented but we haven't got them. So no turkey, but mutton goes a nice deep colour as well, and you can make a design. You might make cubes, little squares. So then you sew it up and you boil it in the boiling range for about 5 hours. Don't borrow a pan from Gainsborough Old Hall kitchen, take it home, put your boar's head in it, and then have all 4 rings on your ceramic cooker going. Your new ceramic cooker going, like my daughter did when she did a boiled pig's head, because it melted the cooker. Oh. There is more to that story, but it's go on, tell it. Basically, we were doing a banquet from this kitchen for Korean TV, their equivalent of BBC Open University. So they were doing food history around the world, and they chose Gainsborough Old Hall as the perfect place for the medieval banquet bit. So we were in here cooking, and we were here. Oh, the best thing. You cook it away, and you go to take it off because it's cooked, and they say, "Oh, can you just wait a minute? We haven't got that. Well, it's cooked." Yeah, but this boar's head, this is what it was for. So it's come here, it's gone out on its platter, it's been presented by there's a whole team that wait on the Lord. Each one has a different role. Each one has fine linen with blue edging on their shoulders, and they are the sewerers, and they will serve up the food to the Lord. So they go down on one knee and raise it up, and he will accept it, and then it's taken to one side, and small portions are taken and put on his silver trencher. So that's all happened, and it comes back in here. Well, how to wrap it up? Well, it didn't fit in anything. So a whole roll of cling film went round it, and then you couldn't handle it. There was nowhere to grip it. So I put it in a bin bag, and I put it there. All the other rubbish was over there. So Peter comes into the kitchen and said, "You got any rubbish?" I'm doing a skip run. Yeah, it's all in black bags. So he took all those black bags, come back, took that one, off went the boar's head. My daughter has still not forgiven me, and it's 14 years. So that was the boar's head. But again, where would all that preparation go on? Because there's only a limited amount in here that you can do for 100 to 150 people. And if it's a banquet, you've got even more staff and you want more unusual foods. So, although this is a brilliant kitchen, the ancillary parts are missing, and it would be so nice to have it confirmed where they are. So, that's an overview of the people that are in the kitchen, on their feet up to about 14 hours a day, and cooking twice a day, 2 meals, 2 main meals. Breakfast was a very light affair and only for some, but the rest 2 meals a day. And it was very, very hard physical work. And this is one reason why we believe, you don't have women in a kitchen like this. In the home, in the kitchen, in their one room, that is for everything. It's for doing the washing, it's for doing the cooking, it's doing everything. You've only got one room, it's one room up, one room up, one room down. So you've got your central fire. And for a long time, it was thought that people relied on, especially in the towns, they relied on fast food, basically. There were people who made their living cooking pies, for example, for people to buy because they didn't cook at home. But what was very common, and it's multi-purpose, is one of these. It's a chafer. Now you can get them quite fancy. I'm sure that in this kitchen somewhere they used to be, and I'm sure it's still here. It's a brass one, which is a very fine example. But this is a chafing dish, so you don't need a lot of fuel in there. The ashes come out at the bottom. So both in the big kitchens and the little kitchens at home where people are cooking just one pot meals, pottages perhaps, but certainly cooking, they were used as room heaters, they were used to warm water for washing of hands, they had so many uses, these chafing dishes. Maybe there's a banquet and you've got different sauces to go out. Medieval green sauce, if you find the recipe, it's gorgeous. If you cook in small quantities, you don't want to be bending over the big fire, you want something like that, so they're very, very versatile. But the thing is, what's provided from the fire, and it was counted along with everything else, is the ash. And one of the reasons why is because the ash was vital for making a cheap soap to actually clean things. So if you take fine wood ash, sifted wood ash, and use it in a greasy pan, a very basic form of soap. Okay, these are so you can make a very basic form of soap. Then if you take, and gardeners amongst you will be appalled when I tell you I cultivate mare's tails. And that's because it's an absolute pernicious weed, and it's one of the most ancient plants that we have on the planet, and it contains in its stem, and you can't call them leaves, they're fronds, it's sort of ferny looking, and it's full of silica, which is abrasive. So if you cut the mare's tail, I hadn't meant to bring some, but my husband put it in the compost. Cut it down, he says, it's a weed. I said, yes, but it's my weed. Which sounded all wrong, but I've been saving it to bring and show you, and it dried out beautifully. But if you put that in with the fat and the wood ash, you've got a very effective cleanser. So, but again, even something as common as meadowsweet for the floors and pennyroyal against ants and insects, all these things had to be counted, and this is why you've got plaques coming out of your ears, because absolutely everything had to be counted. It's a bit like that old RAF thing. I've counted them out and I'm counting them in. That's exactly what they did for everything. So I hope I've given you an insight into the beginnings of understanding how they worked, this kitchen, and how it was purpose-built with the galleries to watch the staff, in the surveyor's room where you can watch the servery and things like that. So I'm going to shut up and see if you've got any questions. So if you've got anything that you'd like to know that perhaps I've missed. Yes?
Your little gadget there.
This one, chafing dish.
Is it used, do you put something on top of, I mean, is that like the burner?
It is, yes. So you can
Like
show
a
you
kettle on
better
top?
here. In the lower classes, they were used to destruction. This is my, it's, I don't know, 23 years old. It's a bit battered. It got left outside because I broke it. But then I discovered, if I were a medieval housewife and I haven't got the pennies for a new one, if I put that in there, and I put my fire on the top, I can still
Yeah.
get my pan on there. So
So
I
it's
did
a
it
bit
at home.
like a slow cooker
There you
today. A bit like a slow cooker today.
It's not quite because the fire is, it's more controllable, it's smaller, but it wouldn't last very long. So, and your ash drops through the holes in the top
Amazing.
and comes out at the bottom. I do have some examples of medieval soap that could be purchased. I've got one which is for cleaning rather, and one which is for washing yourself, which you quite, if you come up and have a look, they are, please don't mix the lids up because it took me ages to figure out which one was which one I got. Because the label, I've had them so long, the labels are no longer readable. The other thing I brought along was some examples of scrubbing brushes. I forgot I brought these, sorry. So you make these at home. These two, lavender stalks, very spiky, and they will do a good job on cleaning your pans. I can't remember what I made this one from, but I think it was grass stalks. So that's that one. And the other thing that you would do would be to have lots of bits of linen that's been dipped in beeswax, because it would just go over your storage jars. You don't need the potter to make lids, you just do that. They've been in there at least 15 years. So, and they are coriander. And all you do is you put it back on and you let the warmth of your hand push it right into the crevices and let it get warm. If you want an airtight seal, you have a ring of beeswax on the top of the pot. You put that linen and wax on top and then run some heat around it and you've got an airtight seal. So this is a set of kitchen knives. Now every medieval cook would have his own knives, and it would depend on what he could afford, what his standard was, and what sort of knives would he have. So these are two basic ones. That's your little basic one. The shape of them changes over the years, and that's how you can date them. But these are mild steel. Stainless steel is not yet available. And that's the other one. And you get all sorts of different sizes of knives for different tasks, for fish, for meat, for bread, and so on. Now the early knives in the medieval kitchen, and this one I hang from my belt, so this one is hard to get out. So this one dates, it's about an 11th century sort of style that went through to around 14th century, 1350. Totally different. And that's a multi-purpose knife. And the other thing is everyone had their own eating kit. I'll just render that safe. Go. So this is your eating knife. Now everyone carried one of those, and the narrower and daintier and more fancy, the higher your status. But everyone had one, alongside a spoon. Now this one is a proper pewter old spoon, so you wouldn't want to be eating off that because the lead content is too high. But you're quite welcome to come up and feel the weight of it, as opposed to the replicas, which have a reduced amount of lead in, rendering them safe to eat. And they have different tops. You might have a twist, you might have an acorn, or you might have, oh that's not my spoon. Somebody's borrowed my spoon. So you might have there's a spoon design that you get which is very common in medieval times, and it's a medieval lady with a medieval headdress, and the spoon top goes to about there. Now I have two granddaughters and they both wanted a Madonna spoon. So we had to find a way of getting them different. We managed it because one is very well endowed and the other one is more like Twiggy and completely flat. So it was Twiggy and the fallen Madonna with the bigger boobies to tell them apart. So in the kitchen you have to measure things. So you've got the little spoons as well as the big ladles and the big wooden spoons that we're familiar with. You would have had these for salt and spices. So that's those. So there you go. That's the things that I brought that you're not likely to see. The scissors. They look like that. And the snips that you see for sheep shearing, old sheep shearing, not the electric razor things, those also would have been present in the kitchen. But that's the style that's coming in for the 15th century, is that big shape. They're very comfortable to use actually. So that's what I brought in for you, so I'm sorry I forgot about those. So there you go. So, any more questions?
Yes.
Now, oh, yes.
How will the kitchen be lit? Was it
Oh,
dark?
yes. Now, in some kitchens, you would have had a fairly high, hollowed out stone, and they would fill that with oil or tallow. So it was like the little tallow lights, only bigger, but it would have been very dim. And it's one of the reasons why the times for cooking and the meal times were arranged at the brightest time of the day, so that you had light to cook by, even in winter. So, but tallow lights don't really give off a huge amount of light, nor do proper beeswax candles, which you wouldn't use in a kitchen because they're too expensive, but they still don't give off much light. So once the sun has gone down and the darkness starts, you wouldn't be able to see much in here at all. The glow from the fires wouldn't cut it either. So, yeah.
You
Yes.
say that this is state of the art, the
Yes.
kitchen, because it's attached to the building.
It is indeed.
Is this one of the earliest in the country, or was
There
this-
are a few dotted around, but this one at 1480 has got everything that you see, almost, that you find at Hampton Court. The only thing that's missing is the raised boiling ranges where you're cooking at this, doing some cooking at this height. It's a very odd fact. The Romans cooked at this height, and then when the Romans went home, we went back to cooking on the floor, and we're still doing it, you know, in medieval times right through to the 1950s. There were still farm cottages in and around Lincolnshire that had they had the stone chimney arrangement, but they were still cooking on the floor, and that's in the 1950s. And I had that from a personal friend who was doing the cooking, so they were still around. But it's the advance of the chimney, the design of the chimney that makes this state of the art. Because if you manage to have a look up any of the chimneys, it's really well vented out to take the smoke away, which is a bit of an anomaly that they have the louvers, which it is known they had for central fires. But as far as I'm aware, there's no evidence of a central fire in this kitchen, but the louver is there. So is it for smoke? Because with the state-of-the-art invention of the flue arrangement, they don't need it unless there's something else producing smoke. It's wandering. I don't know the answer to that one yet. So I don't know, unless they dig down and find evidence burning. I think they'll know. But thank you, that was an interesting question.
Could I ask what the fire would be on in the roasting?
On the floor.
Would it just be on the, would anything be round it? Would it be on a platform?
On
or
the floor,
just to
you would
contain it?
have had, there used to be here, when it was a functioning fireplace and we used it occasionally, we would leave the wood ash there, and you would have a single or double layer of handmade bricks around just to contain the fire. Interesting thing is, when we first came here, there was a different arrangement of spit here. It was sloping, so that you could put different meats on. So you could cook a salmon, you could cook beef, you could cook anything you wanted, because it slopes away from the fire, so you have some temperature control. But this one is very, very early, and I'm not convinced that this is right for this kitchen. I'll probably get into trouble with English Heritage for saying that, but I don't agree. I really don't. I agree. Having cooked here for a banquet, there's no way we could have done the banqueting foods that we know were made, because we used, one of the bishops had a big banquet, and it was some of the dishes from that big banquet that are documented that we were asked to do, and you couldn't have done it on that. You literally could not have done it on a spit like that. So in my opinion, that spit's wrong. It's so much earlier. Dover Castle has a different type of kitchen completely. It's still medieval, but if you go online and have a look at the pictures, you can see the development of the kitchen through the ages, where bits have been built in this corner and a bit more built in that corner, but the central range is this, and that dates to 1100s. So I have to beg to differ with the age on the interpretation of that one. I'm sure they'll find out I'm saying that at some point, and then I'll get told off. I don't care, because I think it's right, because I've used one like it, the sloping one, and I think that's what was right. Yeah.
The meat, I mean, they didn't nip to the butchers, obviously, to get the joint, so I presume they came on hoof, did they?
It would, yes,
So there were
yes.
quite a few.
This is why I was querying, well, there's nowhere in here you could do butchering, and it would want to be close, because you wouldn't be wanting to be bringing joints of meat over any distance. So it's got to be close by, and the evidence of animal bones outside, perhaps, it depends if they were cooked animal bones or raw animal bones, might suggest that the butchery was out there. There was also, if there's a butchery, there would be a slaughterhouse. So you would have the two quite close together. So, and you would only take the meat as you needed it. But then you come against the problem of, at this day, you can't overwinter your stock. You don't have the means to feed your animals over the winter. And if the spring is late, your animals are just going to starve in front of you because you can't feed them. So around Martlemas each year, which is November, you have, you cull your stock, and you just keep the breeding animals, and the rest goes for salt beef and such like that. And that's the other thing. Where did they salt their hams? Where did they salt their beef? Did they smoke their hams? If so, where? Because trust me, the heat that's going up that chimney is not going to be smoked ham, it's going to be roast to a signal. So there are so many questions as to where did they do it and how. And sometimes sheer logic tells you it wasn't in this room. It must have been somewhere else. Close. Is there anything else?
There used to be, in the olden days, a lot of little buildings all the way around.
Yes. Yes.
I wonder if they...
Oh, easily. They could easily be. Whether they were the ones pertaining to the 1480 kitchen, or whether they had long gone and others sprang up. If you think of your Victorian houses with their outbuildings, you know, the washing coppers and things, they had outbuildings. Even before the outside privies, that's something else. You've got 100, 150 people. Where's the privy? because they're not going to use the posh ones in the West Wing, because that's for guests. So that, and all sorts of questions start to come up. There's an awful lot missing, but especially what's pertaining to the kitchen. Although I believe that there was some sort of butchery slaughterhouse over where the library used to be, but was it there in 1480 or was it out here in 1480? Apart from knocking down the library and having a dig and, you know, churning up a few people's gardens, which I don't think they would like, I don't think we're going to know, unless there is a glimmer, because they've now got some superb modern technology that has moved on from the original ground penetrating radar. They can now really fine tune it to finer details of buried archaeology. So maybe they might like to practice around the old hall, and then we might get some answers. Maybe. So, anyone else? Must be time for tea.
Well, I thank you for such an informative talk on the kitchen. I'm so pleased that English Heritage have been so generous in allowing us to be here this evening. I had the privilege of meeting Peter Fayre. Yes, indeed. It was here that we met him.
Yes.
And we went round the kitchen. But one of the interesting things about him is he is, as you rightly said, an authority
Absolutely.
on medieval and Tudor cooking and dining and so forth. But he's also a good authority on furniture.
Yes. Yes.
So that was quite an insight indeed. And I thank you. It's been wonderful occasion. I wish more people had been here to sit at your feet and hear you. Because this kitchen is state of the art at the time. I think it's one of the most important kitchens in this country.
Yes,
I agree with you there. I remember Simon Thurley, who was in charge of Hampton Court, and Jonathan was his number 2 at Hampton at that time, coming here, and he was absolutely gobsmacked, to use modern parlance, of what we had. And I think we undersell the old hall in many ways. English Heritage are doing everything they can to advertise more, but I think we undersell this space that you have brought to life. And I did enjoy the beginning of your talk, talking about the topography of the kitchen and so forth, because it's so important to us. So shall we give a